Madam President, distinguished colleagues, we have gathered today in this hall for a session that should not have taken place, and whose purpose contradicts the goals and principles of the UN enshrined in its charter, namely to sabotage the achievement of a long-term peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. Let us begin with a procedural point. You, Madam President, had no grounds to resume the 11th emergency special session of the General Assembly today. As is known, the decision to convene the session is contained in Security Council Resolution 26-23 and was conditioned by the lack of unanimity among its permanent members, which prevented the Council from exercising its primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. On February 24, 2025, Resolution 2774 was adopted, which stated the need for a peaceful settlement in Ukraine. Thus, the Council fulfilled its function of maintaining peace, and now, according to this resolution, all UN efforts must be aimed at facilitating a peaceful settlement. Thus, Resolution 26-23 was superseded, and there were no grounds for convening this session. However, as we see, the session was resumed in violation of even the rules of the organization itself at the request of European countries, which so love to position themselves as champions of rules. This is a very telling detail. Rules, in the view of these delegations, do not apply to them. They are created for others. After the speech of the President of the General Assembly, whose speech rather represents the speech of a representative of Germany, it is absolutely clear why she is not concerned about the organization's rules. Distinguished colleagues, today, when concrete steps are being taken to establish peace in Ukraine, and it would seem obvious that all efforts should be subordinated to precisely this imperative, this does not suit the authorities in Kiev and their Canadian-European handlers. To disrupt these efforts, their favorite weapon is being deployed: lies. We have heard many lies from these delegations in this hall. They are trying to weave an entire web of lies from the resolutions they throw in, which are adopted by their own votes. These false resolutions will remain nothing more than papers that will eventually be the subject of attention of historians studying crisis phenomena in our organization. However, today the European-Canadian-Kiev triumvirate has surpassed itself by choosing a topic where the lie is particularly cynical, namely assistance to children. Distinguished colleagues, whenever the situation of children in conflict is discussed, whether in the Security Council, the General Assembly, or even in informal conversations among diplomats, the main thesis is always heard: saving children does not tolerate politicization. How often we hear that the fulfillment of humanitarian tasks requires painstaking work to build dialogue, not labeling. After all, the fate of a child depends on it. However, when it comes to the political interests of the European political class, which for centuries cannot give up the desire to move east, cannot part with the dream that Ukraine should be its vassal, its spear against Russia, all principles go into the furnace. The draft resolution presented today for consideration by states is the best confirmation of this. This is a litmus test for those who position themselves as champions of children's rights. To be convinced of the politicized nature of the text, it is enough to look at its title: Return of Ukrainian Children. The question arises: only Ukrainian? What should happen to Russian children who have lost contact with their relatives? Should their rights and interests be ignored? What about mixed Russian-Ukrainian families? Are we being asked by a General Assembly decision to divide children along ethnic lines? However, the purpose of this text is certainly not to help children. Its purpose is to promote the narrative of Russia's alleged deportation of children. For several years now, we have been hearing the figure of 20,000 allegedly deported children. This figure does not change. It is not supported by any lists, any requests from parents or relatives. We have never seen relatives of children allegedly deported to Russia. The authors of the current text are not at all embarrassed by the obviousness of their lies. The main thing is that the lie be huge and repeated often. This propaganda technique is well known in history. The resolution completely distorts the actual state of affairs. From it, you will not learn that the children's issue is one of the few on which Russia and Ukraine have established a direct mechanism of interaction, operating at full capacity since 2023, and that this work involves the Presidential Commissioner for Children's Rights of the Russian Federation, Maria Alexeyevna Lvova-Belova, on the Russian side, and the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmitry Lubinets, on the Ukrainian side. Not a word in the draft is said about the contribution to this work of mediators, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the Holy See, and of course, the state of Qatar, which played a significant role in verifying cases of reunification and providing logistical assistance. At the highest level, Russia's leadership has also supported the initiative of U.S. First Lady Melania Trump to participate in the fate of children affected during military operations. We have always been and will be open to cooperation on the issue of helping children, regardless of political pseudo-resolutions. From the resolution, you will not learn that the reunification of children is a two-way street. 122 children returned to Ukraine, 29 children returned to Russia. Finally, from the resolution, you will not learn that in response to all demands to present us with lists of children that Ukraine is talking about, we were handed in Istanbul this June a list of 339 names, some of whom turned out to be adults, and some had never been to Russia. Often, when checking information, it becomes known that the allegedly sought children are either already with their parents or other close relatives, or never went missing at all. Many of them live in the very same settlements from which they were allegedly deported. It should be noted that upon receiving this list, Russia proposed to the UN Security Council to adopt an appropriate statement by the president to track and facilitate the process. However, this statement was blocked by European countries. I will return to their role a little later. However, contrary to this reality, the draft presented for consideration today, like any other draft of the 11th Emergency Special Session, is stuffed with false accusations. It contains, for example, a groundless assertion about Russia's violation of international humanitarian law, and not a word about the fact that children can be evacuated from a combat zone, that there can be children who have lost contact with relatives, which is in no way connected with violations. The resolution expresses regret in connection with the introduction of a simplified procedure for acquiring Russian citizenship for Ukrainian refugees. Refugees around the world dream of such a procedure, especially if, as in the case of Russian legislation, they are not even required to renounce Ukrainian citizenship, not to mention that the procedure is strictly voluntary. Another favorite accusation is the forced adoption of Ukrainian children. We have repeatedly explained that the very use of this term is an unintentional misleading, since in reality, we are talking only about temporary preliminary guardianship or temporary custody of children who were already without care. The main purpose of using this formula for placing children is so that they are in families. It was chosen specifically taking into account the potential reunification of minors with their blood relatives, if such are found. And here we are talking about a small number of cases. Particularly cynical is the lie about the alleged erasure of the identity of Ukrainian children. And this is said by a representative of a state that banned the Russian language, which is native to many Ukrainians, which banned and is destroying the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is demolishing monuments to writers and burning books. You are probably talking about yourself when you talk about erasing identity. Distinguished colleagues, it is also noteworthy that the resolution does not address Ukrainian children in Europe. The question arises, Ukrainian children do not travel to Europe, situations do not arise there where relatives lose contact with them? Even a superficial search of open sources will be sufficient to discover that back in 2022, the European Commission cited the figure of 23,000 unaccompanied or separated children in Europe. At the same time, the study authors say that the real figure may be much larger. However, no one is sounding the alarm, shouting that children are being taken away, that this removal could be involuntary. No one is interested in data on their specific whereabouts or status. No one is checking whether they are provided with education in their native language and whether they have been subjected to cultural assimilation. According to open sources, as of March 2023 alone, 445 children arrived in Latvia and were placed in families under guardianship. At the same time, it is noted that the European Union does not recognize documents issued in Donetsk and Luhansk. What impact does the non-recognition of these documents have on the separation of children and their parents? A question subject to investigation. And this is only one country, and many are involved in this scheme. A natural question arises: why are these children not mentioned in the resolution? Perhaps instead of false and ostentatious participation in the fate of children on Russian territory, the European Union should pay attention to what is happening at home? This is especially relevant in connection with the fact that the European Union's reputation in matters of treatment of migrants is tarnished. Here it is worth only recalling the pushback of migrants, their deaths in the Mediterranean Sea, or various discriminatory practices. So maybe it's not really about concern for children's fates after all, but about the desire to slander Russia. Here it is worth remembering how the conflict in Ukraine began. You remember how the authorities in Kyiv, who came to power in 2014 as a result of a coup d'etat, called those living in the southeast of the country terrorists and launched a so-called anti-terrorist operation against them, as a result of which hundreds of children suffered? These crimes went unnoticed by European champions of human rights. In Donbass, children grew up and became adults under shelling that you simply did not notice, since it served your interests. And now you do not notice how AFU servicemen continue to commit gross violations against children with impunity in the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Kursk, and Belgorod regions. Just in the week from November 24 to 30, 2 children were injured as a result of a drone attack on a civilian vehicle in the village of Tsukuri, Kherson region. This, by the way, is a very characteristic case because the AFU hunts civilian vehicles. As a result of a drone strike on a private house in the village of Dragunskaya, Belgorod region, a 5-year-old boy was hospitalized in serious condition with burns, and his mother died. A 14-year-old boy was injured during shelling from MLRS of Krasnoarmeysk in the DPR. A 15-year-old girl received a serious head injury as a result of a missile attack on Sevastopol. A teenager was injured due to a drone raid on the city of Cheboksary in the Chuvash Republic. In addition, Ukrainian drones attacked the territory of School No. One in the Kakhovka district of Kherson region, using mortars. Ukraine does not shy away from using mines that children pick up, pedal mines and so on. Who will condemn Ukraine for these crimes? They will remain a figure of omission. Distinguished colleagues, the children's theme was chosen for today's session for a reason. After all, it is precisely this that allows speculation on feelings, on emotions, on the natural desire of any normal person to help a child. But we suggest looking at the facts, talking with those who, not in words but in deeds, help reunite both Russian and Ukrainian children with their relatives, and to whom we are grateful. We call on you to put up a barrier to the use of the General Assembly for selfish political purposes, especially when such a purpose is war to the last Ukrainian. We are convinced that the lie will be dispelled in any case. This has happened before. For years, the same authors who are pushing today's resolution promoted false anti-Russian narratives about the alleged discrimination of Crimean Tatars in Crimea. You remember such resolutions? They still, but with less enthusiasm, address this topic, while forgetting to say that in January 2024, a verdict of the International Court of Justice of the UN was issued, completely rejecting these empty accusations. The court found no violations of the rights of Crimean Tatars at all. The myth of deported Ukrainian children comes from the same sources and has the same degree of credibility. Distinguished delegates, today you have the opportunity to contribute to the triumph of truth. The Russian Federation has requested a vote on draft L-16 and intends to vote against it. We call on all states to do the same. When the time comes to choose which button to press this time, remember, every vote cast for the resolution is support for lies, war, and confrontation, and every vote against is a vote for peace. I thank you for your attention.